Hi, welcome back to my read-along of A Tale of Stars and Shadow. Today we're up to chapter 43. Let's dive straight in. Okay. The monsoon settled in, a constant pattern of short downpours followed by light showers and quick snatches of dry. The new recruits started, 18 humans and 2 winged folk, and joined daily training with the wolves. Several weeks passed as they settled into their new world without Talyn, and 7 months turned into 8 months. The ex-wolf remained scarce. Talyn went looking for him one day, wanting to see how he was, but she'd been turned away by his new wing captain, a terse individual who told her she had no business in his barracks. She hadn't tried again after that, not wanting to make trouble for Talyn. One rainy afternoon, Talyn headed into Dock City once training was over for the day. A recent ship arrival had carried letters from Leviana and Tarkos, and her plan was to go to Petro's cafe and read them while enjoying a mug of Kavi. Set on high ground near the border of the market and wealthy quarters, Petro's little establishment not only had the best Kavi, but his tables sat along a narrow terrace that looked out over the docks and Feather Bay. There were many lovely cafes in the Citadel too, some with breathtaking views, but the last thing she wanted was to spend more time amongst the winged folk. She continued to rage about Talyn being taken from her wing, though she knew some of that anger was covering the guilt she felt over it, and over her sooner than expected departure. She had to keep telling herself she wasn't abandoning them, even though that was exactly how it felt. Theak, the Shadowhawk, Ravenir, they'd all warned her what would happen if the wolves won the Alea game, yet she'd trained them to win anyway, and the consequence had been losing Talyn. Petro welcomed her with a smile as she walked through the door, cloak dripping all over his floor. "After the usual, Captain?" "Yes, please. I'll be out on the terrace." She chose a table in the corner that had a nice view without being crowded in by other patrons, and remained dry under the terrace overhang. The waters of Feather Bay were grey, reflecting the drizzly afternoon. The flags of the docked ships hung limp. She chatted a few moments with Petro when he brought out her Kavi, then opened Leviana's letter. Her mouth quirked in a smile at her friend's cheerful, witty description of events since she'd last written. She was particularly excited about the birth of her new baby brother. According to Leviana, Darkon Sane was the most gorgeous baby ever born in the Twin Thrones. Talyn's smile turned to a frown when the tone of the letter changed towards the end. "I don't really want to tell you this, because I know you'll worry, but if I don't tell you, you'll be angry with me. With a healthy baby boy delivered, my parents have cast me off completely, Tal. They've told me not to return to the family home and taken my inheritance. Just like that, I don't have a penny to my name aside from my Callanan wages. Oh well, it's all for the best, I suppose. I never wanted to be their heir anyway, and I wouldn't give Darkon back for anything. I miss you, Tal, and Cinia and I can't wait till you come home again. All my love, Leviana." Talyn sat back, leaving the letter lying on the table. There was no doubt Leviana had kept her letter deliberately light, despite how awful she must feel. To be completely thrown aside by your parents would be heartbreaking. Sighing, Talyn leaned forward and opened Tarkos's letter. His was much lighter. He wrote mainly of his experiences with Ariar in the mountains, and it was clear he was enjoying every moment of his time there. She was glad for him. Tarkos took everything seriously. Too seriously, she'd often thought. It was time he lived his life, rather than spending every moment considering his every word and activity and how it might reflect on his family. Sighing again, she rubbed at her eyes, shaking off some of the glumness that was creeping over her at reading Tarkos's account of life fighting the brigands. Going to Ryathel after Sari's death hadn't helped in the way she'd hoped it would, despite the presence of Dimoric's relatives easing the edge of her distress. Leaving to go so far away, facing the difficulties she had in Mithranar, they'd helped her distance herself from what had happened. Yet only a handful of weeks remained until the end of 8 months, and maybe that was a good thing. She would be able to see Leviana, be there for her friend properly. She would reunite with Fireflare, with long gallops through the forest and plains around Ryathel. And she missed her family, not only her parents, but her Dimoric's relatives too. The wolves would be fine. Theak was a solid commander, and she'd left them with enough foundation to build a strong detail. And depending whether the Callanan remained interested in the Shadowhawk, the First Shield might even send a replacement for her. But going home meant going back to her old world again too. And while part of Talyn still wanted that, a greater part of her couldn't imagine ever doing it without Sari. She was so busy with her tangle of emotion, she didn't notice the man sitting down at the table beside hers, his chair facing out over the view. When he cleared his throat, she looked up, startled. It's me, Sarvan, he spoke quietly. A quick look confirmed it was indeed the man who'd snuck into her bedroom claiming to be a spy for the Crown. His hair was covered by a cap, and he wore glasses with thick rims. She waited silently while his eyes roamed casually over the bay. I thought it was time to check in with you. You heard that I was attacked? She asked. A little nod. Do you think the same perpetrator was behind the break-in at the palace? She asked the question not because she necessarily thought there was a connection, but to test him. What he was willing to tell her. How good his sources were. Unlikely. He spoke the word decidedly, clearly confident in his answer. One was an attack directed at you, likely aimed to prevent you from playing in the Alea game. The other was an attempted break-in. Nobody was attacked or hurt. And you've got nothing further on who was behind the break-in? She allowed impatience to fill her voice. It happened 6 months ago, Sarvan. I thought you were supposed to be a spy. There was a stilted silence, then, my inability to learn anything more about the break-in is troubling. She leaped on that. So it was a professional move by skilled perpetrators staged to look otherwise. Either that, or you're just not very good at what you do. The first, he ground out. She still thought the break-in had all the signs of being a reconnaissance, a way to test the defences of the Citadel. That fit nicely with professionals being behind it. Find out who in Mithranar has that skill set, and match that with who would have had motivation for breaking into the Citadel. Irritation coloured his tone. I do know how to do my job, Captain. Then do it. She paused, hiding her puzzlement about why he'd come to see her. As with their first encounter, she got the distinct sense more was going on than he'd admitted. It had been 2 months since the Alea game and the attack on her. Why come to talk to her about it now? She sighed, dismissing her concerns. It was a puzzle she was unlikely to be able to solve given her imminent departure. I'll be leaving soon. If you were telling any part of the truth when you said your job was to protect the royal family, then you'll report any information you learn regarding Prince Kewin to Theak Parkson. Silence met her words, and after another moment went by without a response, she turned around. Sarvan was gone. She wondered if he'd already known she was leaving. With a sigh, she rose to her feet. Her carvy was finished and a breeze had whipped up, sending the rain into her face. She waved a farewell to Petro and pulled her cloak over her head as she stepped out onto the street. Captain! Talyn spun, recognizing Tiercelin's voice instantly and stunned to see him waiting for her on the opposite side of the street. He wore plain clothing and stood under a roof out of the rain. She crossed straight over to him. How are you? Is everything all right? I'm all right, he gave a little shrug. I'm sorry I haven't been around. It's all right. I'm so sorry for what happened. The words came out in a rush. I know it was my fault, and he touched her arm, stopping her apologies. I wouldn't take back our win for anything in the world, Captain, so please don't apologize. Are you sure? She searched his grey eyes. A small but genuine smile curled at his mouth. Certain. And once my new wingmates get a bit more used to me, I'll be back around visiting, don't you worry. I did hear that you're leaving soon. She nodded. In a couple of weeks. Is that why you came down here? I hope you don't think I wouldn't have come to say goodbye. No, actually. His face turned serious, voice dropping. I overheard a few of my new wingmates talking the other day in the mess. What they were saying, I thought you might be interested to know. What was it? Remember the break-in? How the Falcon told us that those who broke in tried to access an old storage room in the barracks? Tiercelin shifted closer. Captain, I think that particular room had been used to store Ezerdia. Her eyes shot to his. They were after Ezerdia, she breathed. That would make so much more sense. That's what I thought too, Tiercelin agreed. You said you thought they were professionals. If that's the case, then they were most likely looking to sell for a profit. Then it probably has nothing to do with Prince Kewin or his safety, but it's useful nonetheless. She smiled at him. Thanks for letting me know. Another smile flashed over his handsome face. Any time, Captain, and make sure you do come and say goodbye before you leave. I will, she promised. Odd, Talyn, Sari roused. A professional group of thieves, which, by the way, Zamrul claims doesn't exist, break into the Citadel to steal Ezerdia, only it's been moved before they get there? Sari spoke as Tiercelin lifted into the sky with a wave, skepticism filling her voice. So they're professional enough to get in, but not to know that the Ezerdia's been moved? And why send someone to Kewin's tower in the middle of the break-in attempt? Instinct continued to nudge at her. Ezerdia may have been a goal, but she didn't think it was the primary one. Exactly. They learned that despite the Wingguard's lack of security, they still couldn't get deep into the palace without being spotted. Which might explain why they haven't tried again, even though they didn't get the Ezerdia. It probably didn't matter. She was leaving soon, and anyway, the wolves' job wasn't to police Mithrana's Iserdia supplies. Still, she made a mental note to mention it to Theak. You know what I want to know? Sari asked. If Sarvan's as good a spy as he claims, and he truly does work for the royal family, then why didn't he tell you about the storage room being used for Iserdia? Excellent question, Talyn thought. Okay, that's the end of chapter 43. A short little, slightly quieter one than previous chapters. As usual, I'm going to jump into some author commentary on this chapter. It will have spoilers, not necessarily just for this book, but also the subsequent books in the series. So if you'd like to avoid spoilers, now's the time to depart. And if you are leaving us here, I hope you enjoyed it, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next chapter. Otherwise, let's have a chat about this one. All right, so chapter 43 was a little bit of a bridging chapter, moving us from the big kind of crescendo of the floods and then the win of the Alea game and the consequences and fallout of the wolves winning that game being Tierslon's forcible removal from the wing, through the passage of a little bit of time towards the closer we're getting towards Talyn's departure from Mithranar and return home. And the reason for that is to move us a little bit closer towards the penultimate events of this novel, which are coming up very shortly, and hopefully feel more of a high point. We kind of got to the Alea game and the floods and kind of leveling out a bit, and then we're going to jump up to, for those of you who have read this series, the assassination attempt on Prince Kewin. That is the big high point of this novel, which serves not only as the exciting scene of the assassination attempt, but where Talyn's story starts to become full circle. So this was a little bit of a bridging chapter, just kind of moving us through that period of time. As an author, I like to keep the pacing up in my books, and while I do like to provide enough kind of context and background in terms of world building and the little quiet moments that characters have in between the big scenes, I also don't like it to lag too much. Particularly here, anything that would have been written in wouldn't have necessarily added to the main story in any meaningful way. And so we just kind of bridge it a little bit with a few scenes here. The key one of which is Talyn's little chat with Sarvan, who shows up while she's drinking Kavi at Petro's Cafe. Petro's Cafe serves as a little through line through this series. Talyn learning about the drink of Kavi when she comes to Mithranar, of course, and making friends with Petro, who's one of the Shadowhawks network, and repeatedly going back to his cafe, her favourite, to have a cup of Kavi every now and then. It's kind of a nice little just slice of life through line I like to put in. Obviously, Kavi being a Mithranar version of coffee, me being an incredible coffee snob, obviously. Drinks like that will show up in my novels. In this series, it's Kavi, and in the Inkweaver archive, it's Verseni. I won't say any more on that because here be spoilers that I'm not willing to share just yet. So yes, Talyn's at her favourite Kavi cafe with Petro, and Sarvan drops by for a little chat. And as always, she knows he's not really there for why he pretends to be there. And after a short little conversation with Sarvi at the end of this book, at the end of this chapter, after some new information comes to light that Tierslon's passed on, it makes it very obvious that he's up to something, or he's not telling her everything, and it makes her quite curious. But at the same time, she is starting to realize and understand that she'll be leaving soon, and part of her is actually starting to kind of wrap up her time in Mithranar. She's not necessarily looking to solve any more mysteries or do anything beyond make sure Prince Kewin's guard is as good as it can be before she leaves, and that her wolves are as good and strong and capable as they can be before she leaves. It was a nice little moment for Tierslin, who's clearly doesn't want to have left the wing, but has clearly become a better and stronger person within himself, even though he's been cast out and even though he's with a new wing that by implication and reference don't necessarily like him or want him to be amongst them. He still seems more settled than he did when Talyn first met him. And he seems almost positive about the future and about the fact that once things have kind of calmed down a little bit, he'll be back to spend more time with the wings, which, again, it's not necessarily an out loud or an overt or an in-face moment, but just those little things that are testament to the impact that Talyn has had in Mithranar on individuals, including Tierslin. So yeah, if you have any kind of comments or questions on this chapter, please drop them in the comments below. I'd love to chat about it. As always, we'll soon be ramping back up again towards, like I said earlier, the penultimate event of this book, which I'm looking forward to reading. And I look forward to seeing you for next chapters. Have a great day, guys.